who have money or produce wealth. The Bible tells us that God gives people the ability to produce wealth. In fact, I want to share a very specific example from the Bible of someone that God gave him the wisdom, gave him the ability to produce wealth. There was this guy named Joseph, and his leader, Pharaoh, had two dreams that really confused and bothered him. So with God's help, Joseph was able to interpret the dreams. He's like, hey, God is really trying to lovingly warn you here. And he told God that God was warning him that he was going to have 7 years. Egypt was going to have 7 years of amazing abundance. That was the good news. The tough news was it was going to be followed by 7 years of devastating famine. Listen into God's wisdom that he gave Joseph to help them produce wealth even through a devastating season. In Genesis 41, it says this: "Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food." Joseph's onto something here. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but he's really onto something. He really got some good wisdom from God. And then he says this. It says, "This food should be held in the reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." Can I tell you up front that there are times where God lovingly warns us with things, but he also lovingly gives us solutions. And he did that for Joseph. There was a warning through these dreams, and then through Joseph's wisdom, there was help that came. In fact, Pharaoh was so impressed with the plan, he declared God's Spirit was in Joseph. Man, Joseph, God's Spirit must be in you. This is so wise that you're doing this for us. See, I want to share with you, God's full of spiritual advice, but he's also full of practical advice too. Now, Joseph did something practically that's wise for all of us. For every single one of us. He helped Egypt live below their means, and instead of waste the extra, he set aside the extra for them. Did you hear that? Because that can be helpful for us too. He helped Egypt live below their means, and instead of waste the extra, now it's time to party, right? He set aside the extra. But when the 7 years of famine hit, Joseph used the reserves to provide for Egypt and was able to even bless other people and other nations. He actually helped people live and survive through this. By doing that, he helped produce more wealth for Egypt. So the question then is, because we're in this series, what would Jesus undo? So if God gives us the ability to produce wealth, if he's not bothered by wealth building or bothered by money, if money is a tool to provide and bless ourselves as well as our families, well, what would he undo? Let's go back to what Paul said to Timothy, because it's very important. Look what he says to Timothy. He says, the love of money. Everybody say the word love. The love of money is the root of all evil. See, Jesus knew while money's neutral, it's a tool, it can be good. Jesus knew it's a big competitor for people's hearts and lives. So Jesus would undo the love of money so it doesn't become a trap. This is why Jesus gives us loving reminders throughout the Bible about money, so it doesn't become too important, so that it doesn't become a trap. In fact, Paul tells Timothy, he's like, Timothy, the trap can be so big that it can ruin people, where they pierce their own selves with many griefs. Guys, Jesus doesn't want us to ruin ourselves. As we've been talking about for a year and a half, he wants us to be free. He wants us to be free. He wants you to be free. Speaking of ruin, listen to this question by Jesus. I personally believe it's one of the best questions Jesus asks, and it deserves honest reflection from us. Look what it says in Matthew 16. What good is it if someone gains the whole world but loses their soul? I want you to think about gaining the whole world for a moment. It's big. It's big. Like, what good is it if you gain it all? Or what can anyone trade for their soul? See, this question can be asked about many things that become too important. And I think it's a good question to ask every once in a while when things are starting to become too important. What good is it if I keep gaining in this way? If it means, it doesn't have to, but if it means losing myself. But let's put this in money terms. I've heard before that the world's wealth is around $500 trillion. Not $1 million like Austin Powers, $500 trillion. Guys, every time you decide to spend money, you'd have more of it. I'm going to buy that boat for $500,000. Great, I just gained $1 million in the time it took to buy that boat because of the interest of $500 trillion. You'd have so much money, you wouldn't even know what to do with it. Jesus comes along and says, $500 trillion, your soul is worth more than that. Your soul is worth more. What Jesus is saying, what good is it if you have more money than you know what to do with? You breathe once and you have $1 million more because of the interest, right? What good is it if you lose your soul but gain the whole world? What good is it if you accidentally pierce yourself with many, many griefs? Think about all the griefs that can happen. Money can be really weird with friendships, right? Have you ever been like me where someone owes you enough money that it's substantial to you, but you don't want to remind them because you don't want to look cheap, right? It's like, crap. Am I the only one? Thank you, Pastor Julie. I guess it's the pastors. So, but it's like, it would be good to have this back, but I don't know if I want to remind you either, right? What about some of the more serious ones where the griefs are just piercing, whether it's people tempted with theft or disloyalty or dishonesty, or we can be pierced through being stressed out, right? Like, I've been there before. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but like, I don't have enough, or will I have enough? That can pierce our soul as well. Or money, or the lack of, can cause comparisons where we can really get into our self-worth and value. And Jesus comes along and says, your soul is worth more than $500 trillion. The next time you are tempted to think, I don't know if I'm that valuable, I don't know if I'm that worth it, Jesus tells you that you're worth more than if you gain the whole world. He wants us free. Jesus wants us free. And the Bible has wisdom that can help us practically keep the love. Everybody again say love. That's the key. Money is not bad. We just talked about that. Money is neutral. It's a tool. But he has practical wisdom in the Bible to keep the love of money in check so we're not entrapped, because he wants us free. He wants us free within. He wants us to win within. Listen to this verse in Proverbs 23. It says this: do not wear yourself out to get rich. Now, notice it doesn't say, man, you are so bad if you have money or you build wealth. No, it doesn't say that. The verse is encouraging us to not wear ourselves out to get rich. There's such a big difference there. Because what good is it if we burn out and we lose ourselves and we have no me time or no God time just because our bank account is a little bigger? Or what good is it if we're so overworked and overtime that we don't have time for family or friends? The whole point is there's nothing wrong with building wealth or producing wealth or having money. We just need to know when to stop. Guys, there will always be, especially in our gig economy, and man, I'm so surprised today how many ways there are to earn $1. And I think it's actually very exciting. We have the gig economy and YouTube heroes, and there's just so many things nowadays where someone can earn $1. But the downside to that, while that can be really good, the downside to that, there will always be another dollar to chase. There will always be another dollar to chase. Overtime and side hustles are fine. Again, they're fine. And they can help us move ahead or help us during a really tough season survive. But at some point, you have to know your limits and know when enough is enough. Robin and I understand this. There have been several seasons where both Robin and I have had our main job and then a second job or a main job and side hustles. And as I was preparing for this message, I was like, yeah, there were 2 side hustles that I had where it was really tempting to say, I could just do one more because that would be a little bit more in my pocket. I could just do a little bit more. And is there something wrong with doing a little bit more? No. But I had at some point to know when to stop. At some point, I needed to turn it off and say, okay, time for some me time to be with my family, whatever it is. Because here's the thought process. Instead of just chasing after more, we have to ask questions as well. Am I free within? Am I at peace? Is my pace healthy? Am I connecting with God? Am I leaving time for me, like the undistracted me time? Am I leaving time for family and friends? I remember one time someone was sharing with me, they're like, hey, PK, can you pray with me because I have a really big decision to make. I have a decision, there's 2 jobs, and one of them would make several $1,000s more, but it just doesn't seem as peaceful to me. This will still provide for me. It will still help me do well, but I just think it will give me a lot more peace. And so we prayed about it together, and I talked to him later, and he said, and I was so proud of him for being able to think through this. I was so proud of him because he has a family to provide for, a spouse to provide for, and this is what he said to me. He's like, this is how I came to the conclusion to choose. He said, what good is it if I had several thousand more dollars, but several thousand more pounds of pressure on me? And so I decided to take the job that still provided for me, but I took the job that would give me peace too. You see, guys, knowing when to stop isn't just a physical thing, it's also knowing when to stop mentally. Because worry is another thing that causes people to wear themselves out for more money, because we get to this point where we're like, will I have enough? And then because of that we have mountains and mountains of stress and worry that's just destroying and ruining our soul. And can I say, I get it. I'm not just trying to say that to connect with you if you're there right now. I really, really get it. Robin and I have had very, very, very meager seasons. If you were to see our bank account, you would have laughed at us and cried with us at the same time. You're like, I can't, like, how are you doing this, right? We've had very, very meager seasons, and it affected our outlook on our present and our future. But let me share with you the thought process that I often had after I came out of that tough season. Here's what the thought process was. Man, I wasted that season. I was so worried. I had so much turmoil going on inside, and God provided every step of the way. I've never come out of one of those seasons saying, you know what? I wish I would have trusted God a little bit less and worried more. Usually when I got out of those seasons, I was like, I wish it would have been different, and knew that God was going to provide somehow, even though it wasn't tough. So can I tell you, I get it. I know it's not easy, but even during meager seasons, you have to know when to stop and trust that God has your tomorrow and that he will provide for you. God, I've done my part. Thank you for doing yours. And I trust you. See, because trusting God can stop the turmoil of worry in your soul. So do you see how important it is to know when to stop physically as well as mentally? Because it can keep us free and here. And this is what, while Jesus loves blessing and he cares about those kind of things, this is what he cares about most. This is what he died for. This is what Jesus died for. He wants us free in our souls. So let's look at another piece of wisdom from the Bible. Listen into Ecclesiastes 5. He says this. Say it with me. Whoever loves money, it's not money. The issue isn't money. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. Does it say you can't have more? No, it's just telling us that whoever loves money, you'll never have enough and you're never satisfied. This is why contentment is key. Never being satisfied can be a reason why people wear themselves out for more. But contentment can actually help you not wear yourself out. It's like, I'm good. I've had enough for today, and I'll work again tomorrow. Or, you know what, I've already pushed through. I've already worked hard for my future. Time to take a break. Or I'm good. I'll take my day off because God has my tomorrow. See, I think often people have this type of thought process about contentment. It's like, you know, if I reach a certain salary, if I own a certain home, or if I reach a certain number of assets, contentment comes. Can I tell you? And I've thought that way at times too, and I'm still at times God has to deal with me on those things. But can I tell you, contentment doesn't come because we arrive outwardly. It's a choice we make. It doesn't come because we get everything we want. It comes because we choose to be thankful for what we have. And this is why gratitude is so key in keeping us free within the soul that Jesus died for, the soul, you, the one that Jesus cares for. It keeps us focused on what we do have instead of constantly looking at what we don't have. And do you know, sometimes it only takes, at least for me and Pastor Julian, no, just for me at least, sometimes it only takes a few things that we don't have to keep us in turmoil inside. Sometimes, I'm going to give you an example in my own life. Sometimes it only takes one thing that shifts us. And I'll give you a very recent example that God reminded me of as I was preparing for this message. I think I have a really good plan to set up the Langdons for the future. Talking about the immediate Langdon family, the Chris Langdon family. And it's a good plan. It's not a bad plan. But I remembered while I was doing this message that if I'm not careful, my church life is going well, pastoring is going well, relationship with Robin's going well, with my kid, everything in my life is going well. But sometimes if I'm not careful, I start to look out into what I want for our future, and all of a sudden in my soul, discontent starts to stir up. Am I going to make it? Is it going to happen? We're not there yet. No! And all of a sudden, my life is going amazing. One thing shifts it. And it's not even a bad thing. It's good that me as the provider of the home, or one of the providers of the homes, is thinking about a good future for the Langdons. That's a really good thing. But if I'm not careful, we don't have it yet. Are we going to make it? Are we going to get there? Is it ever going to come? Am I going to be 90 when it happens and not be able to enjoy any of it, right? One thing can sometimes be the things that shift us. Do you see how easy it is for our hearts to drift towards what we don't have? You know that even when we get what we want, sometimes discontent stays because we're so in the habit of focusing on what we don't have. Even when we get what we want, it won't be too long until we're like, oh, I don't have this. Like, man, I'm so thankful for my 4% raise. Someone got a 9% raise? Mine was only 4%. I'm so thankful for my new car with a $200 payment. Someone got a Tesla? They can afford a $1,000 car? If we're not careful, it's so easy to just look at what we don't have. That's why we have to, guys. We have to be in the habit of directing our hearts towards what we do have. Because we're in the habit of thanking Him, contentment can keep us free within, which helps the love of money stay in check. In fact, I want us to slow down right now, even in this message, and take a pause in the message and give you guys like a couple minutes. Most of you have the message notes. Get out a pen from the seat. Every one of you have your cell phones. Please know now's the time. You don't have to sneak a look at your cell phone. You can actually look if you want. Get out your cell phone and type out, just for 2 minutes, write out some things that you're thankful for. Because guys, think about this. If I shared this earlier, that sometimes one thing shifts my perspective. I could have 50 good things going on in my life, but my soul can start to direct towards turmoil because it's like, what's going to happen in my future? Are we going to get there? Are we having enough money now? Are we doing it the best way now? One thing can shift 50 good things. And so just for 2 minutes, I want you to take your notes or get out your cell phone and type. Take 2 minutes while the music is playing, Jacob, just to thank God. And I had this thought during this 2 minutes. Maybe it's for me, but maybe it's for someone in the room. Man, just if some of us would consistently wake up in the morning just thanking God for what we already have, maybe it'd start to break the cycle when we go throughout the day and we hear the radio ads on the day to work about the new car, the new home, or we drive by better neighborhoods that we're in, or when we see the advertisements for better vacations or better, maybe if we started our day thanking God. And again, is there anything wrong with wanting better? No, not at all. But we don't want our hearts to be trapped by ingratitude either. And so maybe if we started out our day, I'm not even saying legalistically every day, but just a lot of our days going before God and listing off the things in our brain that we do have, instead of starting the day already feeling shortchanged, which makes the hustle and grind even worse. Maybe that would help some of us be free. What would Jesus undo? The love of money. He wouldn't undo money. He wouldn't get rid of money. But he would undo the love of money because he knows it's a trap for our soul, and he wants our soul free. Here's another thought from Jesus, the last verse we're going to look at for today. In Luke 16, it says this. Jesus is speaking, and he says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Now, does Jesus say you can't work for money? You just have to give all your time for free. You're a Christ follower. We don't deal with money as Christ followers. Does he say you can't build wealth? Does he say you can't be wealthy? No to any of those things. But he knows that if money and God are competing and you try to serve both, you'll likely end up loving one and despising the other. And Jesus would undo the competition in our hearts and the hatred that comes when we serve two masters. Here's a shocker. Jesus doesn't want us to hate God or money. And there's a way that we can do that. When we serve God and keep money in its place. When we use money and love God. He wouldn't want us to hate either. And you know the way Jesus does his best to undo this for us? He demonstrates himself while he was on this earth. He still does this to this day. He demonstrates that he's more worthy of love than money. That's why he has verses in the Bible like, "I'm faithful, I'm reliable, I'm fulfilling, I'm longer lasting, I'm freeing," which is the most important thing, right? I can free your soul. I'm joy-giving. I'm forgiving. I'm powerful. I'm healing. I'm gracious. I'm more compassionate than any number you may have in your bank account. Also, you can lose money, but I am always here. I am always near. I am always present. And our response to this Jesus who is more worthy of our love is to cultivate a deeper love for him by strengthening our relationship with him, slowing down, letting the distractions of our day go so that we're free to love Jesus by spending time with him. So we're free to serve Jesus through others or whatever the example is. You know, earlier I mentioned that knowing when to stop can keep the love of money in check. Knowing when to, why is that? Why is that? Knowing when to stop can give us time to be with God. Let me give a very silly, facetious example. A few weeks ago, I shared that one of my passions was my favorite football team. And I also love my wife. I shared that as well. Now let me merge these two things together. What if my passion, and remember I shared also, Pastor Julian shared this before, that someone confided in him that they lost their marriage because of a hobby, a golf swing, right? Is there anything wrong with a golf swing? Absolutely not. Adam Sandler yourself away. Happy Gilmore yourself away, right? But it became so important and such a passion that he wasn't cultivating his relationship with his spouse anymore. And so let's pretend that my passion of my favorite football team got so high that Robin's like, okay, cool, I gave you game day because you wanted to watch the game. It's like, sorry, Robin, I really don't have time to strengthen our relationship because now it's time to watch the highlights. It's time to see how good my team is. It's time to see what all the, sports analysts are saying. And she's, okay, maybe tomorrow. And then she's like, okay, she comes to me tomorrow and she's like, hey, can we hang out now? And I'm like, sorry, now it's time to get, excited about the next game. And I just need to see where everything's going and what the analysts are saying. Okay, I guess I'll try again tomorrow. Comes to me tomorrow. Hey, do you want to go out and have something to eat? Sorry, I just bought some football gear for this weekend. It's going to be... I think you see where I'm going with this. Every single one of us only have so much time in a day. Is there anything wrong with me having passion for football or surfing or a golf swing or the ocean or mountain hiking or whatever you have a passion for? Is there anything wrong with that? No, but we have to know when to stop so that we're strengthening and cultivating other important relationships in our lives. And it's the same with God. Not always running ourselves ragged, chasing after more, or burdening our soul with worry can actually free up some of our time to give it to God. And here's what's so cool about God. You can't get this fully in any other relationship. God is so cool in this way. When we give ourselves to Him, He actually refreshes and restores us. He takes away oftentimes the burden and worry that's in our soul. We can't always get that with other people. Sometimes we give to others and they cause more stress to us. That's not like that with God. When we go to God, He takes our burdens. He takes our worries. I will refresh you for your next day. You see, I was thinking about it. Knowing when to stop and being content is very important because it helps keep the love of money in check, which is very important. But I was thinking about it this week. I was like, God, it's good to have some wisdom in the Bible that keeps the love of money in check for all of us because it's so easy for us to just drift this way. What takes away or lessens the love of money? And the thought was this. And I know it sounds so simple, but it really is so true. When we fall in love with Jesus more. That's what lessens and takes the competition and starts to take the grip away. Loving Jesus can start to eradicate the competition money can have in our hearts, as well as begin to dispel the love of money and keep it where it was supposed to be, which is a tool to use. Money is meant to be used. Jesus was meant to be loved. Jesus was meant to be loved. Money was meant to be used, and He is worthy of our love. He deserves to be served. He deserves our time and attention. He deserves our thanks. He deserves our loyalty and devotion. As we're starting to close, at the beginning of the message, I mentioned how valuable it is to have, people speak into our lives. Like, we've all had those times where we've walked into a situation and been like, oh my gosh, I did not know how hard this was going to be. I didn't know what I was getting into, right? And we've also had times in our lives where, like, I'm so thankful I had someone care about me enough to speak into my life. I just want to say that, and I know any of the pastors would do this as well, but I've helped many with practical financial tips as well as spiritual advice when it comes to money. I've seen many things. I've helped people with lots of money, and I've helped people with very little money. I've also had experienced seasons of plenty. I've experienced seasons of enough, and like I've already said, I've faced very, very, very meager seasons financially. And I say all this to say I don't pretend to have all the answers at all, but if you need for someone to listen to you, that's not going to judge you, that wants to help you, someone who can speak into you when it comes to money, don't hesitate to connect with me because I love being able to help people like people have done for me. Guys, you really don't have to be trapped with Jesus' help, you can be free. Before we pray, let's put up, like we usually do, let's put up some questions to contemplate. Hopefully you're going to do this right now, or maybe you can do this tonight or later this week. But are there times where money's in charge of you instead of you being in charge of your money? Let me give a couple examples. Maybe like, yeah, money is really in charge of me. I'm really worried about it right now. It's really trapping me. Finance is affecting me. I want to be free, but it's in charge of me in this way. Or you're like, yeah, I sometimes don't know when to stop. I just go guns to the ground, and before you know it, I'm like on the brink of burnout. So sometimes that's how money is in charge of me. Or for some of you, you're like, you know what, it's so easy for me to get on social media and start comparing. I don't have this, I don't have that. And before you know it, you're trapped with a self-worth issue. And so you're like, you know what, that's maybe how money is in charge of me. But again, the reason we're asking this question is because Jesus wants you free. He wants you free of the trap that sometimes finances can do in our soul. Number two, if so, and we talked about a few of them today, and I think Pastor Julian's going to talk about one of them in a moment. If so, what can you do to keep that in check? What can you do to keep that in check? Again, we talked about a few in the message today. And then number three, what's something you can do this week to strengthen your love for Jesus? Because again, he's the one that's worthy. He's the one that deserves our time and attention. He's the one that's freeing. He's the one that can do the great things in our souls. He's the one that's faithful. He's the one that's reliable. He's the one that's powerful. He's the one that's gracious and can bring freedom within. So as Pastor Steve comes back out, Jacob, you can leave those questions up there. Maybe spend some time with God right now and ask him, hey, God, is there anything that's taking away my freedom when it comes to the issue of money? God has no issues with money at all, but he knows it can bring traps. God, is there anything when it comes to money that is taking away my freedom? So talk to God for a couple minutes, and then Pastor Steve, maybe give them a minute or two, and then you can lead us in our song, and then Pastor Julian's going to come up and bless us.